It's time to put down our hymnals, children. I'm Jason Inman.
And I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And we're going to review and recap Preacher Season 2, Episode 2, Mumbai Sky Tower. And if you haven't seen the episode, you might want to come back later because there's going to be plenty of Texan spoilers. The episode begins where the last one we left off, where the Saint of Killers facing off with Jessie. He fires, and then a truck gets in the way and smashes the Saint. All the gun-toting citizens come out and see the Saint get up and walk towards them, and then Jessie makes them all fire at the Saint, who's bulletproof. And then the Saint kills them all. All right, let's talk about this awesome scene. Of course, wasn't a dream, was very real. Of course, it is Preacher logic that Jessie, Cassidy, and Tulip would, of course, end up at a gun enthusiast convention in a hotel, at the Comfort Inn or whatever they were, the Relax Inn. The Relax Inn is where they were at.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that it abbreviated to GAGA. It was gun something, that was the abbreviation instead of the NRA. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about Jessie's first confrontation with the Saint?
I was surprised that this was the real one, that it wasn't a dream like you talked about. But in a way, he says stop, and the bullet does stop by by running through another human being's body. So it's not like Genesis doesn't work, it just doesn't work the way he suspects it will.
Oh, so you think the truck driver heard stop?
Mm-hmm, I do.
Oh, interesting.
I do, and I actually thought that if you were going to use a gun convention, this was kind of a clever way to build up another fight scene. I really enjoyed this first scene.
Yeah. Tulip in her hotel room sees the Anvil, Texas disaster on TV as gunshots ring around them, and then Jessie tells a man to be quiet as they run from the Saint, and then the Saint hears it when Jessie uses the word and comes towards him. Our heroes escape as the Saint walks after them. At a gas station, Cassidy tells Jessie about Ganesh, the former angel on TV, and then we see Fior, the angel from Season 1 at the casino, and all the ways he's tried to kill himself since Season 1, and he turns that ability into a magical act. Okay, so in Season 1, and very much so in the Preacher comic books, Fior and DeBlanc are kind of terrible. They're not great.
They're not great here either. I thought the actors do a great job.
They're not great here, but I actually thought Fior, his loss and seeing that he really misses DeBlanc, his friend of eternity. We saw like a really quick picture of them in front of the pyramids.
Yeah, it was really bad Photoshop, but I think that was the point.
Yeah. But I actually really kind of like this montage where he accidentally figured out that like, oh, I can just be a magical act. And I think it does fit in the Preacher world that, of course, the people of Texas are all just like, yeah, cut his head off, woo!
Yeah, violence, the Preacher civilians definitely would buy into this as a really, really great show. I couldn't believe that we brought the angels back in a way that was this inventive.
Yeah.
The angels did a good job in Season 1, but they weren't my favorite aspect, and I was kind of not looking forward to them to come back, and it was a really clever way to incorporate him.
Let's talk about, as well, probably the most important aspect of this little part of the episode. Cassidy reveals that he's a big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yes! The crossover I didn't know I was going to get, but I super needed. It was so good when he was like, oh, and then Terminator 2, or a Nazgul, a ring wraith, clearly. And then Jessie being like, if you say Gandalf, I'm going to kill you. Best part of the episode.
Yeah. Jessie and Cassidy talk to Fior. He tells them both of the Saint of Killers, and Fior reveals that he hired him. And Jessie figures out that the Saint is tracking them each time he uses the word. Jessie reveals that God is missing to Fior, and Fior reveals that he doesn't care. And Cassidy then asks Jessie for 2 hours and 45 minutes to talk to Fior. Okay. So we get a reveal, Jessie gets a reveal that we've known about for a long time, that the angels went to hell and hired the Saint. The Saint has to kill Genesis. And that the Saint would stop if Fior said stop. And it's surprising for me that Fior didn't know that God is gone, because in the comic books, Fior and DeBlanc do know that God has left.
Well, maybe in this continuity, they've been on Earth for maybe longer than we suspect.
Sure. What did you like about that scene, and also as well Cassidy asking specifically for 2 hours and 45 minutes?
The thing I actually liked most about that scene was the really weird part where they brought in like the Make-A-Wish kid to take a picture with him.
How do you do it?
It's such a weird, again, like unique detail to this world. Like, of course he would be a giant star. I like that Jessie and Cassidy, I guess by association, mix up his names, because I don't remember what the angels are called ever.
And it really confused me at the beginning.
It takes the entire scene for him to correct them, but that's because it's not important until that moment. And I also didn't expect that we were going to have a train spotting kind of moment spinning out of the end of this scene.
Oh, with the number?
Yeah. Like the number to me felt like a Sherlock moment, but the scene that it's leading to feels very Trainspotting. And I think for Cassidy, it's appropriate.
Jessie and Tulip talk about Tulip's Uncle Walter and how he was all she had left, and then Cassidy drugs up Fior and they have a beach ball sequence. Fior reveals that the Saint can kill angels to Cassidy. Jessie and Tulip want to get married at the chapel as Tulip sees someone and chases them, and then Gary confronts her. Jessie figures out where to go next to find God, and then Gary reveals that a victor has been looking for Tulip, and then he asks her to call Tulip, and then he attacks her, forcing her to talk to Victor. Tulip then beats the crap out of him as Cassidy sees him, and Tulip tells him to not tell Jessie. Okay, now this is sort of a tie back to the comic books, and the first time that we see Tulip in the comic books, she is performing a hit. She does it badly. And actually, I think it's in the second or third arc of Preacher comic books, they kind of like get rid of that really quickly, that there is a hitman that Tulip is beholden to, because they go there and Jessie with the word says, forget about Tulip, we'll leave it all alone. So this might be the ongoing thread for Tulip this season. Also, I actually thought the whole 2-hour and 45-minute montage, the drugging sequence, as I like to call it, between Cassidy and Fior was actually really kind of cool, and how like Cassidy was just like, oh, he just wants a friend.
Yeah. I'm like super not into drugs, but I thought it was great as a narrative.
And they read Archie comics.
That was great.
He was like, oh, that Betty, she's a minx.
I also love the moment where Cassidy's like, yeah, so you guys slept together, right? And Fior's like, no, like, what are you talking about? And Cassidy's like, you're best friends, you loved each other, so you must have slept together.
Yeah.
I thought that was like a really funny moment. I will say, I thought that the conversation about Walter really came out of nowhere.
Yes.
I thought there wasn't enough leading up to it. It just was something that appeared in order to spur on the action that's coming with Tulip later. So if I'm going to make a criticism about the episode, it was like, for me, that moment really slapped me upside the head because I'd completely forgotten about Walter.
I will also give a plus because, yeah, Walter was very forgettable in season 1, but I will give a plus that I thought the fight between Gary and Tulip was pretty damn brutal.
A+, and a great way to show that somebody who's smaller in stature can be just as deadly.
Yep. In the chapel, Fior reminds Jessie to not use the word again, and then he reminds Jessie about Eugene, aka Arseface, in hell, and that he's not going back to hell to rescue that kid. Tulip then shows up and doesn't want to get married to Jessie anymore, and Fior and Cassidy have a very lovely goodbye. And then Jessie tells Fior they're going to New Orleans, and he uses the word on Fior and tells him to find peace. The Saint shows up at the casino, and Fior tells the Saint, kill Genesis, you will see your family again, because you gotta stop Jessie, because he's gonna keep using the word. He betrays Jessie. Then Fior goes on stage and the Saint kills him dead as the crowd boos. Okay.
I have a quick question, Preacher comic book expert. Is it canon that the Saint of Killers can track the word?
No.
Because I like that detail. I think
not.
it's a really interesting way to sort of drive him forward throughout this season. I just didn't know if that was something that was lifted from the comics.
In the comic books, the Saint of Killers can kind of follow who he wants, and they don't really explain it. He just sort of knows where Jessie is, and he like there is a whole sequence in Preacher where they meet up at Monument Valley, and the Saint just shows up at Monument Valley because he just sort of knows.
Yeah.
I like it too. I actually really like that every time Jessie activates the word, he's like a blip on radar. It's like boom, 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 you know, like right here. The thing I still don't like, and they still haven't explained, how come the word doesn't work on the Saint? Because in the comic books, again, it does. And it's a very important plot point for why it does. And it's a very important plot point for the Saint, and what is probably his most important storyline in the comic books is the ability that Jessie has to use the word on him.
I actually have a hypothesis that now that Fior is dead, the two people who hired him are dead, even though he's on that mission, know that the word will now work on him because there's nobody he's bound to anymore.
Interesting. I don't know about that. It's an I don't know. That's an interesting theory. But I do hope they explain that this season. I think that's a very important point that needs to be explained. Because the word of God is supposed to be used on everyone, even God. I liked the beat where we found out that Fior is still gonna betray Jessie. That he's like, that human should not have that power. That human is technically responsible for why my best friend died. He went to New Orleans. I don't care. Please kill me on stage.
Also, yeah, as soon as Jessie said find peace, I was like, well, he's not making it out of this episode alive.
Yeah, and also, again, we go back to prime Preacher fashion where all the people boo him because he died.
Oh, thumbs up or thumbs down that Tulip and Jessie didn't get married?
Thumbs up, because I actually was very surprised by that, because that, spoilers, doesn't happen in the comic books at all. Doesn't happen in the comic books at all. They never get married in the comic books. So actually when they introduced this, I was like, please don't do this. Don't do that at all. I think it was a weird choice. I think they just needed Jessie and Tulip. I think they needed Jessie something to do in this episode.
Out of the way, yeah.
Because Tulip had the Gary thing. Cassidy had Fior, but Jessie was the one that like, oh, I don't have nothing to do. Let's get married, maybe?
Yeah, I will say, I think Dominic Cooper played it really well, even if it was kind of not entirely necessary.
Yeah. All right, let's move straight into the rating of this episode. Ashley, based on a scale of 1 to 5 sheriff stars, what would you give this episode of Preacher?
This episode of Preacher is not as good as the premiere episode, but it's still better than everything in season 1. I think it's still a great episode, so I'm going to give it a 4. I thought it was a really good episode.
Why do you think it was a step down?
Because to me, it was a lot of weirdness for weirdness' sake, because it's not an episode that pushes a ton of the plot forward. Like, the first episode was just, like, firing on all cylinders the whole time, and like we talked about with Jessie and the weird turn with Tulip's character, like, there is stuff in there that feels still a little bit clunky. That's why I would say it's a little for 4. How about you? What are you going to rate second episode of Preacher?
I highly enjoyed this episode just as much as the first one, even though this one was more of an exposition dump a little bit more. We had to have Jessie figure out the Saint of Killers, because he doesn't know who the heck that guy is. This is the first time Jessie's ever heard that name. I do like the idea that Jessie has heard of this legend before, that there is a sort of Saint of Killers Texas legend. I thought, I agree with you, this is not as action-packed as the first one, but you can't have every episode be completely action-packed. You gotta slow down for a beat. We can't be rockin'. We do have to learn some beats. I still, you know what, I'm going to give this a 5. I think this was really a strong episode. I liked Fior way more in this episode than I ever did in season 1. And I do think the Saint stuff, every time the Saint showed up, was really cool. And I thought Cassidy got a lot of cool beats, plus a great setup for what Tulip's storyline is going to be in this season.
Yeah, this episode is a really good Cassidy episode.
This is a strong sign for where this season is going for Preacher, in my opinion. So go down in the comments and tell us what you thought about this episode, and please click subscribe, because it really helps the channel.
And why not click on one of the videos that's popped up on your screen, and for more exclusive geeky content, go to patreon.com/Jawiin.
We'll see you in 2 weeks for another Preacher review, because they're not doing an episode next week, but we'll see you next time, my babies.